Welcome to the follow-on video on managing Autonumber ID columns. This video delves a little deeper, showing you how to reset the ID number and create a central custom ID management system to manage all the Autonumber IDs you'll ever need in one list. For the quick fix of resetting the ID, I'll show you a simple way to reset the ID number whenever it's required. And this could be to work with a new set of data annually, quarterly, or for a different set or subset of content. For the rest of you, we will go all out and create a simple list that will centrally manage all your custom ID needs with a demo Power Automate flow showing you how we can manage multiple IDs from many lists and sites all in one place. If you haven't seen it already, take a look at the previous video that I've done, link here, where I've looked at using the built-in ID in order to create a nice formatted, cosmetically appealing sort of ID for your lists. Now the problem with this one that I used on the previous video is I can't reset it. And I really can't manage it. I can't administrate the ID system in any way. So if I go in and show you, if I just bring the ID back on screen, go to my list settings for this list I'm using, go and modify the view, and there's the ID number. This ID is built in to Office 365 into the SharePoint online system. I can't reset it. Why would I want to reset it? A couple of examples. I might be creating and bug testing this list. I might be putting a Power App sort of customized form in there. I might be using other Power Automates to manage the list. So of course when the list goes live, I might want to reset the IDs back to 1. I can't do that. I haven't got the facilities to do that. If I was using this list on a quarterly or yearly basis and I reset the list every period and I want to reset it back to 1 for any reason, I can't do that. So there are going to be some quirks that you may not even realize you'll need until that time comes about. And again, everyone's different sort of approach to how they want the system to work is going to be different. So if you are one of these people that wants the ID to be reset, there's two methods that you can do depending on the circumstances around the list. The quickest and easiest is to build a new list from this one. So if I go into my site contents, click new and click list. Rather than bookings, I might want to do a bookings, let's say on an annual basis. So I now want to do a bookings 2021 or 2020 since we're at that particular point of the year. So don't forget that is a unique ID. I can go back to after I've created the list, I can go and cosmetically just make it say bookings, so that the users only ever see 1, but hidden behind it is the unique ID to which particular bookings list that we are actively working on. But I want to capture all the columns, all the data, all the structure that I had from the previous bookings list. So what I can do instead is say from an existing list. It points usually to the site you're in first, so that I can then tick the list that I want to use as a template. But if you have got the list stored in another site environment somewhere else, you can select that and pick the list from there instead. So there it is, there's my original bookings, and I'll click create. I've now got a new list, and straight away it has the columns that I built, it has the ID, and if I do click new and put in something, anything, and save it, you'll see the ID resets back to 1. This is cool. This is very handy. And what's great about this is rather than having a simple bookings template, which I think is a bad idea because in my previous year bookings I might have made some improvements that change in accordance with my business change, and I want my new list to be based on the very latest updated version of the list. So I can pick a previous list with all the modifications, all the tweaks and all the bells and whistles, and use that. Now there is a downside to this, and that is that if you add anything else to this list, if I'd gone in and created some Power Automates, if I had gone in and customized the list form using Power Apps, I will not get a duplicate of those. I would have to either copy the old ones and create new copies of them and then connect my new list to them, and I'd have to do that every time, or I'd have to point the current Power Apps and Power Automate and point them to the new list. Either way, it can be quite fiddly, and you may not want to do that. So if that appeals to you, brilliant. There we go. That's option one. Option one, though, means having to rebuild the list. So there may be circumstances, I can't off the top of my head think of any, but I might want to reset the numbering, but with the data that is already in there. Now that's quite dangerous because I could have a conflict of IDs kick in, but if you're managing this in a certain way that you are very confident that's not going to happen, you wouldn't want to use this method. The list being created from scratch may not appeal to you. So what you'll have to do is create your own ID management system, a central place where all the auto IDs that you want can be centrally stored. You can give administrators or certain people access to that list, and they can reset them upon demand. And this is done very instantaneously, very quickly, and bang, the list is ready to start with the new IDs. You need to create some sort of list. This list can go in any site. So if I go in and create a new list, and for the purposes of demonstration, I'm just going to call this IDs. Okay, it's a brand new list from scratch, so I'm just going to go to the bottom and click Create. As always, you've got a list with a title column. The title is going to be used for just a cosmetic recognition for every ID that I'm putting in here, and I'll give you an idea about how I've done this. But then what you do is you add columns for everything that you want to manage within the ID system. So I'm going to add a column, which would be a number column, and this would be storing the current or the last ID number that was used. So I'm going to use a current ID number, but this is where you would reset it. So what you would say is whatever number you typed in this item, when you go to create a new item in that appropriate list, it will generate the next number from what you've typed in. So if I type in 100 here, the next item that's built in the appropriate list will be 101. Okay, so this is a raw number, no formatting. This is just a raw, simple number. So I'm just going to put in there. Okay. What else would I like to do that could be really made easier to process? I might want prefixes and suffixes. So I might want to add a column to say I would like some text or something that would be a prefix for this type of ID. So I'm going to have a prefix column. I'm going to omit the descriptions. Found something really odd lately. This is just a late thing. This is June 2020. Of late, when I add new columns, it seems to hide the previous ones I've built. It's a bit of a bug. It will go away. Hopefully it will go away. But if you do come across this at any particular point, just go into the view and retick the column. This has just happened over the last couple of weeks. I've spotted this. It's a bit weird. So I'm going to add the column. I'm not worried about it at the moment. Suffix. There we go. I'm going to click Save. There we go. And the last thing I want is I might want different IDs. Don't forget, this one list is going to centrally manage unique IDs for any site, any list I'm going to use. I've got them all managed in one place. That's the idea of it. And those IDs might have different numbers, level of digits. So I might have a 4-digit number in one ID, I might have a 6-digit number. So I'm going to create another column that specifies the format mask, as I call it. So I'm going to call it the format mask. And I'm going to put in the description so I can narrate this as I'm putting it in. But this holds the format in which the number appears. So i.e. 0000 makes the number a 4-digit number. Now, if you use Excel number formatting, that's what I intend to put here. So I can use zeros for compulsory numbers. You can use hashes. And that one there saying I would like at least one absolute number, but you know, if I want bigger digits, I want tens and hundreds, then the hash represents optional extra numbers if required. And the reason why you put hashes in there is because you might want to put a comma to separate thousands, or you might want the number to be something like this, 00 dash 000 dash 00. So you can mask this as and how you want, but all that gets stored in the ID is a unique number. So how you mask that, how you make that block, we have the complete freedom to do that simply and have the number system set that up. I'm just going to save this. Don't forget, I'm preparing this list to manage many auto numbering IDs. So those numbers could come from different columns in the same list. I might have multiple IDs in the same list. I might have them in different lists. I might even have them in different sites. So I'm going to take advantage of the fact I've got a title column here as a cosmetic description, a nice simple description that reminds me of which ID is which. So think about how you'd use the title when you're building these IDs in. Now my example is I'm building an ID, a booking ID from my bookings list that's in my MOUSE, my mouse site. Okay, so my title, for example, when I create a new one would be site : mouse, comma, I might do list : bookings. All I'm doing is I'm breaking down the structure of which site, which list, which column. And then I'm going to have in there, this would be the paid. It must be the column that you intend to change. Now don't forget, I'll explain it in a minute, but as per my previous video, the bookings list has got a paid, which is the one that actually generates the new number. But because it's a field people can manipulate and actually access and type over, I've hidden it and then replace it with a calculation that cannot change, that cannot do anything with it. It makes it read only, and that is called the bookings ID. So for every time you do an auto ID, you may need two columns, one to store it in, which we want to then hide from the user so they can't manipulate it, they can't change it anyway, and then one that's a calculated ID. Now you can get away with just one column and then use Power Apps to hide or make the column read only. I'm not going to go that crazy, but I can do a video on how to make it one column rather than two, if you prefer. So there we go. So in there, I'm going to choose the ID number that I want my paid to start with. I'll do that as a 0. Prefix, well, I only want a prefix for this one. I don't want a suffix, but the input mask for the number itself, for whatever that appears to be, I would like it to be a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-digit number. That's it. That's all our ID people have got to do now, is just go in and configure that. And you could be careful with this so that they don't just change it ad hoc. If they do make any changes to this ID list, you can have some Power Automate that sends an email, please confirm this is being changed. Maybe it can send an email to say, please check this list and make sure it's been emptied or reset accordingly. So, there are rules that we can put to protect ourselves better from just changes ad hoc. So I'm going to click Save. There we go. So I've now got in here the list that I need that then centralizes this one unique auto ID. And I would create as many items in this list for every ID that I want to centrally manage. So what exactly is my Power Automate going to do now? When I create a new booking, and the booking is the demonstration that I'm doing, The user will type in all the information they need, la 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 la. They will then click save, and that will then start the Power Automate. What it's going to do is the Power Automate is going to kick in. It's going to go into the IDs list, and for that column that I'm generating the ID number for, it's going to look for the row that represents it, and all the prefixes, all the suffixes, and so on. But it's going to identify it by this, not via this. Okay. This is so that I can use an action in the flow called get item, singular, not get items, which is plural, because that will complicate it, and the Power Automate will assume that what it's retrieved back could be one or more items. It must be a single item, otherwise we get complications with arrays. Now once I've done that, my Power Automate is very similar to the last one I did in the previous video, but now I can tell it everything it needs from the stored data. I can say I want you to grab that number and add 1. I would like you to put that prefix at the beginning. I would like you to put that suffix at the end if it exists, if both of them exist. And I can even tell it to use a format that has been provided by the person and is not hard coded into the Power Automate. So my Power Automate now is built, and if there needs to be any adjustments, any improvements to the way the numbered value looks, it can be done from this list. And then the Power Automate just picks it all up and applies it. So it just makes it easier to manage. So away we go. Let's give this a go. I'm now going to go into my app launcher. Going to go into my Power Automate again, bring that in a new tab, and if I go into my flows, I've already got the previous one in there, which is that generate paid. I am going to do it from scratch. I could nick that one and tweak it. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to, for safety purposes, just turn this off so it doesn't run. Once the other one's built and it's safely working, I could probably then delete this one. I don't need it anymore. But now I'm going to go into my new button at the top. I'm going to create an automated from blank. I'm going to call this one generate paid number from ID list. And again, it's going to be a typical SharePoint data connector I'm using, and again only when an item is created. But as I said on the last video, you could use when it's created or modified depending on the circumstances of how your IDs work. So I'm going to do when an item is created. I'm going to click create, and I'm now going to specify the list and of course the site where that number is being created and added to, which is of course the bookings list. For this to work, so I need to create at least one variable. I'm actually going to create two. I want to break the process down. I'm going to create two variables. One that will grab the number in as a number and increment it. And there's various different ways we can do that. And there's going to be another variable that will then store it as a text value that will allow me to apply the prefix, suffix, and the format mask of the number. So I'm going to create two new variables. If you've never seen variables before, as explained in the previous video, these are where you can store values in RAM, in your memory, temporarily, where we can manipulate it. So I'm going to do an initialize variable. This one's going to be called int new number, and that will be an integer. I'm just going to leave the initial value empty, but I am going to rename this to say initialize int new number. So that's the name of my variable. Now I'm going to create another variable, or initialize a new variable, and this would be the one that would then be the format. So format ID. This would be a string, and again leave it empty, but I'm going to rename it to say initialize string format ID. Name them as you feel comfortable. I'm now going to do a new step that will get the current number from the IDs list. So don't forget that we're now going to grab the data we need from the IDs list, pull it in to prepare it. So next step is to go back to the SharePoint data connector. And what I want to do is work with an item. Now it's very important that we use get item. You can use get items if you know how to sort of get around the complications of working with the arrays of data. Now the only way you can get item is if you know the ID. We know the ID because we have it here. So we're going to have to manually plop that in. There are better ways of doing it. This is the simple way to start. You can improve it later as things go on. This does open for flexibility. So connect to the site, pull in the list. Don't forget this would be the list where the IDs are stored, and then the number ID that you want. Make sure I understand what that get item's doing. So I'm going to say get ID information. Probably a good idea at this point to save your flow in Power Automate there. Any errors, just go in and compare it to the video, check and update accordingly. The next step is to take those two variables and now create the values we want, starting with the new number. So I'm going to click New Step. This is a variable data connector, and you also set variables there. Go looking for it, and we are going to apply this to the int new number. And what I want to do, I want to grab the new number that is in the bookings ID. There it is, and it's going to go and grab the current ID number, pull it in, and then add one to it. So I'm going to do an expression that will do this for me. So I'm going to click in that box below for the value, go into the expression, and there is a function called add, and all it does is it just adds values, numbers from as many sort of storage or values or properties as you wish. So we're going to use the add function, and the first thing we're going to grab in there is the current ID number. So I'm looking inside the get ID information and then look for that current ID number. There it is. I'm going to put a comma at the end, and then I'm now going to add 1. I just want to add a 1 to whatever the current value is. So if I click OK, get that finished. So we set the variables, give that a decent name. So I'm just going to say set new number as current ID number plus 1. The second thing to set is the format ID, and we're going to concatenate the prefix. We're going to format the new number using the format mask, and then we're going to concatenate the suffix. Now in the past I've tried to use, if the prefix doesn't exist, don't add it, and it becomes very complicated. Through this method, if I haven't added a prefix or a suffix, the concatenate will just ignore it. It will just add like a 0 string. So we're going to do a nice simple concat. There's no need for a condition. We just splice all these together using that, then a format of that, and then that, and we'll concatenate them in that order: number 1, 2, and 3. So back to my Power Automate, let's do that. New step, variable again. Yes, I know the set's there. I'm still going to click the variable data connector. I'm still going to click set variable there. It's just something I do in the videos step by step. What am I setting? It's just the format ID. And now with the value, I'm going to do another expression. So back to the expression window over here. And this is going to be using the concat function. And this allows us to concatenate or splice together values from multiple properties and fields. So open bracket, and first thing I'm going to go and grab is the prefix. So don't forget that's sitting in the dynamic content, and inside the get ID information, that's the action we pulled the ID data in. Don't forget, if the prefix is empty, it will just add nothing, 0 length string, which is very nice and simple for us. There it is. Okay, now I kind of made a bit of an naughty here. I didn't actually talk through this, but when I put the comma in, I assume my cursor's in the right place. It should be, but you notice my cursor's not visible. So, and if I click somewhere, I keep my cursor away from. This is just a naughty thing. It hasn't moved the position of my expression I'm building to where my cursor is. But if I press the comma, it does actually put it in. If I just press escape to get rid of that box, you can see my cursor was in the right place. As long as you don't click, you can fluently build the expression even though you can't see your cursor. Hopefully the developers will maybe put some code in there that will do that and tidy that up. Next step, I want to now grab the ID number that I added and incremented in this previous step. So I want to get that new number, but I want it formatted with the format mask. So to do this, I'm going to use a function called format number. Now it starts getting heavy because we've got lots of open and closed parentheses brackets everywhere. So the good thing about this is it closes the brackets as you open them. So that's a really very handy thing. The format number has got two arguments. The first thing is what number do I want to format, and the second thing is how do I want to format it, and that's going to use the mask that we created, if you remember. So the first thing I want to do is grab the variable that should be at the top somewhere that now has my new number in it. Okay, don't forget cursor's off the screen, but if I press the comma, there I am, I'm in the right place. So now I'm just going to go in, go to the dynamic content and look for the format, and the format is the format mask field. Bang. Now my cursor is it inside that closed bracket? I don't know. So again, don't click with the mouse. Use the arrow keys on the keyboard to move the cursor, and which will then bring it back on screen. So if I use my right arrow key, I know that I've got to get past that closed bracket. I'm now in the right place. I should now be back at the concat function, which is ideal. And the last thing to do now is put in a comma, and now I want to put in the third string of text to concatenate, and that is the suffix. So I'm going to go looking for the suffix inside the get ID information. Just make sure I'm in the right action set there, which it is. Just going to go down and get the suffix. Okay, now that should be everything. I'm now going to click OK. I'm going to rename that new action. So I'm going to say set format ID with prefix, masked number and suffix. Okay, probably a good idea if I could spell. So let's get that. It's not a case number, it's a masked number. Ah, typos, just something that lives with me. Right, okay, now, so if we look at what we've got so far, we've kind of got the preparation stage at the beginning here. We've prepared by pulling in and defining all the information we need. We've then manipulated the information, tweaked it as we need, and the last thing to do now is dump it back in. So we've got to dump the data in two places. We've got to dump the new ID number into the bookings list, put it here, And that, don't forget, when you build a new one, it will say generating ID until the Power Automate is finished, and that will replace the ID number. However, very, very important, though, don't forget this. Make sure you're putting it in the right one. Don't forget, we create 2 columns as per the first video. I'm putting it back in the paid, and the booking ID is a calculated one that shows that value, but because it's read-only, it stops the users from tweaking. So that's just a regular text box. But don't forget, the other thing we've got to do is we've got to put back the new number back into the IDs. So when we've finished, the ID number as it is, I've got that as a 1 there, which is a bit naughty. Let's put that back to 0. Bit of off-screen tweaking and testing there, spotted. Let's put that back to 0. So when I'm finished, what will happen is it will take that number and put back the new one. So that will replace that 0 with a 1. Hopefully. Let's see. Let's go back. Let's create the first thing to do, and that's to update the item that the trigger was pulling in. That's the bookings item. So we're going to go new step, SharePoint data connector, and we're looking to update an item. Let's click that data connector, and again, it should be in that list somewhere. Looking for update item. You could also cheat and just put in a couple of extra keywords to save you a bit of time. So there is the update item. First thing I need to update is the bookings list itself, the list that I am dynamically generating numbers for. There's my site. There's the bookings list, and the ID number, because it's whatever item the user's adding. Well, that item is whatever item was pulled in from the when an item is created. So I'm going to go into this panel here, and you're looking for this one, when an item is created. That's the ID of the booking they've created, and I'm going to put that one back. Okay. And again, I've only got 2 columns at this point. Be careful here, because when I'm finished, I'm going to be adding more columns. If I add more columns, you'll have to come back in here and populate those extra columns with the keep as scenario. And the keep as is where you say, where that title there, I want to keep that as the current title is. So I'm going to go into the, again, don't pick up the wrong one, scroll to the when an item is created and pick up the appropriate column in there, plop it in. You're saying keep the title as it is, and then the paid will be the new number that's been formatted, so it's the format ID version of our new number. Get rid of any default text. It might pick up the default value in there. You can just remove that and just rename that accordingly. Update new booking with new ID number. The second thing is to let the IDs list know that we've updated the number, so it puts it in here and just adds that, and all we've got to add is just the new number. So we added the formatted version in the bookings, but we're adding the new number only, just the simple one without the masking, back into the IDs. So we click new step. Again, it's a SharePoint data connector. It's exactly the same action really. So we're looking for the update item. What am I doing? I just said use your filters. Update item. But this time you're putting the new basic number back into the IDs list. So choose the correct site. Choose the IDs, and then again wait for those columns to appear, and when they do, you're doing the same as process again. So I want the ID to be that we're updating to be, don't forget, number 1. So each Power Automate, you're going to put in hard code the action number appropriate for that column you're administrating from this list. So that's number 1. And then with all this information, you're saying the title leave as is, but make sure you're doing it from, because we've now got lots of extra columns here, lots of action headings here. Scroll down to the one that says get ID information. You are putting back what you got from here. So this will be update ID information when I'm finished. So the title as is, using the get ID information. Title. Do that with all the other ones. The prefix should be the same. I hate the fact that it jumps even though I'll just scroll to it. It's just the way it's been coded. So you just have to scroll down and grab and make sure. But make sure you're going to the right header each time and then grab the correct column for that. So the prefix goes in there. Search again. Get ID information, suffix. And of course the format mask. If you leave them empty, you're basically saying update and make sure that property is nothing. So you've got to tell it to put back as is, as I call it, and that is leave it as it is. So there's the format ID. The last thing then is to say, well, I now want to update the new ID number, and that is the new number. At this point, let's rename that in case we need to fix it later. We can identify it again. So update ID information. Okay. Now I tend to not change the trigger. It's just something I do. But in this case, I could identify it because I'm trying to pair the fact that these two work, but I also should be pairing the fact or identifying the fact that these two work. So maybe I could do when a new booking is created, so that I've got the keywords sitting in the right places there. So I could rename that to say when a booking is created. In theory, this should work. I'm actually expecting an error. And let's see if the error. So when I run this, I'm expecting the run to fail at this point. But however, when I have done this a couple of times, it has worked. So hence why I've done it this way and I've got it in it. So if it works, brilliant, leave it alone. There could be an error. I'm expecting the error to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to save my flow. I'm now going to go in and test. Thank you. I'm going to test it by adding a brand new booking now. So I'm going to go back into my SharePoint list. There's my bookings. I'm going to create a new booking. Let's call that one new booking using the ID list numbers. There we go. I'm going to click save. Don't forget that that number won't be generated straight away because the Power Automate can take up to about 5 minutes to run. So I think I'm going to pause the video. I'm going to do another pre-test as well. So there might be a couple of run actions in there. One more. You only have one run action. I might have a couple in there. Let's give this a go. So I'm going to go back to my flow. And so that I know that it has successfully run, I'm going to go back to the flows dashboard. And you are waiting for your first one. I've actually done a couple of presets, of course I will. But yeah, there you go. There's the failure that I was looking for. So I'm going to go to that failure. You may have a fail as well. I'm going to explain why. It's a bit weird, but this is just the nature of working with variables in your Power Automate compared to the data stored in the list. And where it's failed is on this set new number as current ID number. If you're already aware of this, you can just skip this waffle. But I've set the ID, when I initialized it, I set it as an integer. However, a lot of people misunderstand this, that when you create a column using numbers, a lot of people believe that when you set the new number of places to 0, that makes it an integer. It doesn't. Your numbers in SharePoint are using a floating data type. So it's a floating precision for decimal places. So there isn't an integer column so much, and the problem is that I'm trying to put a square peg in a round hole sort of thing. So I'm trying to put the data from one data type into one that is conflicting, and they don't tally. It's a really easy fix. So where I've done it as an integer, this obviously didn't work. I'm going to click edit. I mean, as I say, don't always make it floating. Floating uses bigger RAM, it uses more memory than an integer. So I'm always cautious about sort of being conservative and starting with smaller ones. And if it's crashed, no big deal. We go to the initialize and we notch it up to the next one, which will be float. So instead of it being integer, you want it to be float. Once you've done that, save the flow, and then you can test it using that failed instance. So I'm going to say using data from previous run, and then that failed one, if it failed, just test it again and it will go through and it will work. It will work with the float. So depending on what you're doing with the data, depending on which direction you're taking and changing the data, integers can work, but if I'm putting it back, it's got to be on a floating precision data type. So very important. Okay, now that's worked. So if I go back to my bookings list, you can see I've got the booking 0001. That's updated in the paid, which my calculated column is now bringing back correctly. And if I go back to the IDs, my current ID number is 1. Let's test this properly. Let's go into that ID number. Let's say, oh, by the way, we want our bookings to start from 101. We want them to look like we've been very busy. So we're going to do, let's say I would like it to be 100. Don't forget, I put in there the number before the first number I want it to appear in my items. So let's put 100. Okay, and let's now go back into my bookings list. Let's create a new booking, and let's go and put in a title. New number is at 100. So I click save there, and again, as per my previous video, I've got the thing telling me it's getting a new ID. It's just a default value in the text string, and when the Power Automate updates the value, it replaces it with the correct ID number. And I'm going to go back into my list there. I'm going to go back into here to wait for that new run. I'm hoping to see booking ID 101 or BK 000101 appear in my list. Right, that seems to have finished. Let's go back into my bookings list. Let's press F5. Ah, look at that. It's so cool. I don't get out much. There it is. So I've now got a booking system with a unique ID reference that I can now reconfigure at will. I can go into the IDs and set the ID number. I can change the prefix. I can change the suffix. I can change the format mask. What you'll need to do then is to include some sort of governance to make sure people do it at the right time, make sure there's some testing that they should do before they go in and just change the ID fields. I hope this is useful. I hope, again, you know, the idea is to open doors and give you some different ways of looking at how we can work with Autonumbers. And I hope this actually is a method that you could give a go and try, and hopefully it will work for you. That has got to be the longest video I've ever created. 45 minutes, my God. I'm so sorry that it's taken that long, but I hope this was worth it. I hope you'd be able to get something value out of this. You know the drill. I've got different social media contacts you can contact me on for any comments, any suggestions, anything you would like to see in a video. Please subscribe. That way YouTube can update you and let you know when I've got new videos coming out. I'm going to try and make these a bit more frequent. Oh, stay safe, have fun. I'm going to bed. Good night.